Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 9th, 2010. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. With this week, the Mad Fermentationist returns. Michael Tonsmeire and his brewing buddy Nathan Zeender share examples of Kvass, beer brewed with bread as an ingredient. Very cool. If you're new to home brewing and would like to get into the hobby for the first time, check out our website, basicbrewing.com, where you can find archives of our audio and video podcasts and our DVDs to walk you through basic and more advanced brewing techniques. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Basic Brewing, all one word. Also on Facebook, I'm at facebook.com/basicbrewing.james. And our show page on Facebook is at facebook.com/basicbrewing. Thanks again to everybody clicking on the Amazon.com associate link on our basicbrewing.com site, especially during this busy holiday season. Whenever you think of Amazon, think of us. Click on our associate link first. It won't cost you any extra, and you'll be helping us to bring you the show, and we appreciate your support. We appreciate the extra effort that it takes to go to our website before you go to Amazon. So thank you very, very much. We also have associate links for Brew Your Own magazine and the American Homebrewers Association on our site, too. And I know that they appreciate you as well. And you can find our Basic Brewing iPhone app on the iTunes Store. We're on the BlackBerry podcast directory, too. And big news for Android users, there is now a Basic Brewing podcast app for Android. So check that out. One note of explanation. Apparently, when you download the app, a warning pops up that says the app uses services that cost you money, directly calling phone numbers. Well, what this means is that the app is built on a sort of template that allows podcast producers like me to input a phone number that you can use to call the show with a single click. But since we don't do call-ins, at least not yet, this isn't active, so no worries there. The app isn't going to call a bunch of folks automatically while you're sleeping or anything. Or at least I don't think it will. So don't worry there. And who knows? We might do a call-in feature in the future, and it's nice to have that available. We hope that you will have fun with the app, and as usual, we greatly appreciate your support. I am well into the current BYO Magazine BBR experiment comparing homebrew mashing techniques. As you may remember, my original plan was to compare brew in a bag to batch sparging. So I did that. I brewed one of each, and I got some interesting results. No spoilers. But then I got to thinking. I used a different water-to-grain ratio in the two batches. So was I comparing apples to oranges? So to test that question, I redid the batch sparging brew with the same water-to-grain ratio as the brew in the bag. So interesting. Now, one note, if you and I appreciate those of you who have pointed this out, if you read Chris Colby's blog post on the experiment, he says that brew in a bag, using that technique, you don't rinse the grain. Well, you can do that way, but what I've been doing, and has been suggested to me by listeners out there, what I do is I reserve some of the water, say 4 liters, a gallon around there somewhere, in a second pot, instead of putting all of the water for brewing in the main kettle. And then while that main kettle mashes, I bring up the water in the second pot to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, or around 75, 76 C. And at the end of the mash, I take the bag out of the main kettle, let it drain for a minute or so, and then I put that bag into the second pot for sparging. Stir it around a bit, rinse those grains a little bit more, and then what I do is I hang the bag up over the kettle, and I use a ladder strut to do that, and I let it drain, and I squeeze it as much as I can until I get almost all the wort out. And it's amazing how little the grain retains doing it that way. So just another hint to help you get some more efficiency out of your brew in the bag batch. I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys are doing for mash comparisons out there. I know that there are some of you who are doing it. I've heard from people on Twitter and I appreciate that. I think I've got time for another round, so I think I'll dig out my sparge arm from the basement and see if I can remember how to do a fly sparge batch, too. The deadline for the data is January 8th, so you got plenty of time to jump in as well. And I'm doing 2.5 to 3 gallon batches so that, it's less expensive to do the project, and I won't have that, all that beer to drink to add to my holiday poundage after it's all done. This is from the mailbag. Terry in Canada says, I know you focus mainly on U.S. content, but I was hoping you may be able to spread the word and help build some support for our fellow Canadian beer lovers in the province of Alberta. Apparently my countrymen and women are in need of some support. A law has been passed that prohibits the sale of specialty beer that's about 11.9% ABV. It's designed to curb binge drinking, but as we know, binge drinkers don't go out of their way to buy Russian Imperial Stouts, Big Belgians, or barley wines to get their kicks. If you could spread the word, that would be fantastic. We need all the support we can get. So, some good vibes going up to you guys in Alberta, fighting the good fight to get good legislation in relation to beer up there. Sounds like our neighbors to the north are having to deal with some legislation with good intentions, but unintended results. So kind of like here in the States, where I worry that legislation dealing with those nasty energy drink concoctions may impact legitimate styles like coffee beers, and I hope that doesn't happen down here as well. Brad from Appleton, Maine, heard me talking about wanting a dedicated brewing room as my ideal piece of brewing gear. And Brad says, years ago I had built a 12-foot by 20-foot deck off the back of my house, but it rarely got used for its intended purpose. It was framed with very rugged stock, so, with building permit in hand, I designed a space specifically for all things fermentable. This included waterproof flooring, wraparound stainless counters with molded sinks, and commercial restaurant faucets, all free from some local renovations. I included floor-to-ceiling windows for plenty of natural lighting, lots of GFI-protected electric outlets, a dedicated beer refrigerator with Johnson temp control for lagering, and even a small wrought iron patio set in a corner for mini tasting room. Lots of counter space for my fleet of carboys and kegs, all stored high enough so that siphoning is a breeze with minimal lifting. I built a mini open deck off the back of the original deck so that I can set up my propane-fired Cajun cooker just a few steps out of the brewery. I installed rubber wheels on anything that I needed to move from inside to outside, like my stainless steel grape basket press and my 14-gallon Blickman conical. I'm using old wooden wine cases mounted on the wall as kitchen cabinets. The new room really put a lot of fun back in the brew day. I'll bet. Holy smokes. In that same episode that we talked about our ideal brewing gear, the question from listener Joe that inspired that talk about dream brewing gear had to do with him wanting a conical fermenter that you could pump boiling wort into and chill it right there. Well, this isn't exactly that, but listen to this from Dave in China. Dave says, I'm a bit behind on episodes, so I just heard the question about what to use for fermenting vessels in the 1028 episode. I'm currently living in Shenzhou, China. Home base is Burlington, Wisconsin. I brought over some Northern Brewer extract kits and minimal gear. I bought a good quality 36-liter stainless kettle, and that's what I actually ferment in. I've completed 2 batches with no problems. I put the lid on while bringing up to a boil, and again the last minute or so of boil in an attempt to sanitize it. The only change I made to the process is using hop sacks so that I minimize the hop matter left in during fermentation. I'll be home during the holidays and plan to pick up 2 more kits. We'll see after some more batches, but I think so far I'll just keep this part of my normal practice when I'm back in the States where I'm not limited on equipment. So assuming the person asking has a brew pot large enough for 10 gallons, then maybe they can consider fermenting in their kettle if they have a decent lid. Very interesting, Dave. He says, my 36-liter pot is 36 centimeters diameter times 36 centimeters high. A delightful surprise was that in this diameter pot, 1 centimeter equals almost exactly 1 liter of volume. So I have a stainless metric ruler, which I use for volume measurements. He's got a store-bought dipstick. Dave says, I plan to pick up another kettle before my time here is done and bring them back to the States with me. Very cool, using the kettle as a fermenter. So if you could somehow dump the yeast out of the bottom of your kettle and pressurize the thing, you could have one vessel for brewing, fermenting, and serving as well. Just stick a tap on that thing. That's a challenge to you. Can you build a vessel that mashes, boils, chills, ferments, and serves all in one? All right. Enough of that. Cool letters this week. They're always cool. I always share the cool letters. Not all of even the letters I don't share are still cool. Boy. It's been a while since we had a visit with the Mad Fermentationist. Michael Tonsmeire and Nathan Zeender have been playing with Kvass. That's a traditional bread or traditional beer made with bread. And we were lucky enough to receive some samples in our studio. Well, here we are in the Basic Brewing studios once again, drinking beer for the second episode in a row. This time, I'm hoping that the beers will be, on a whole, better than the last ones that we had. Welcome to the studio, Andy Sparks.
I'm hoping they'll be better than the last time, too.
And Alex Roberts.
I don't think they couldn't be better than that last one.
And coming to us live via either in or near the nation's capital are Mike Tonsmeire.
Pleasure to be on as always, James.
The Mad Fermentationist, and Nathan Zeender.
Thanks so much.
Nathan, do you have a moniker?
I don't. I'll have to work on that. Yeah, maybe by the end of the show, after we have some beers, I'll figure something out for you.
The semi-mad fermentationist, the mad by association fermentationist.
Fair enough.
Now we're going to talk about something that through history, beer and bread have kind of run parallel courses, I would think. And today we are combining those into a style, if we can use that word, called Kvass. Right, Mike? Tell us about this style.
Yeah, no, this is originally a Russian, Ukrainian, Eastern European kind of beer, fermented beverage. Nathan loves calling it a folk beer. So something that people could throw essentially whatever they had into the pot, bread, honey, spices, fruit, raisins in particular, mint in particular, and get something that was their own creation. I mean, I think it's one of those things like pad thai that probably every grandma had her own particular recipe or particular uses.
Yeah, it's like real beer necessity, peasant beer. So you have inedible bread, whatever. You can get some nutrition out of that, you know. And, you know, the fact going back, 1,000 years, it would be boiled so it was safe to drink, so that sort of classic story of early brewing,
And usually very low alcohol, 1 or 2% usually.
Yep.
The sort of thing that you could drink morning, noon, and night because the water wasn't safe. Table beer would be what would be called in other cultures.
Usually drunk, just brewed and drunk within a couple of days. Yeah. It would turn sour. Obviously, like all beer back then, relatively fast. Yeah. It was spontaneously fermented, or with
either with the starter from their sourdough culture, and that's going back to that combination of bread and brewing that often the local baker would get his yeast from the local brewer. Resources were fought over between what would be used in the bread, what would be used in the beer, and a lot of times during wars or when they're rationing, beer got the short end of the stick on it. And all the wheat would go to baking, and brewing would get barley, maybe some rye. So a lot of sort of using what you can get your hands on. Whereas today we're so used to being able to go to the homebrew store and get exactly what you want. Crystal 75 from Belgium and pale chocolate wheat from Germany. exactly what you want. It used to be that you just, get barley and have to make beer from it.
And it's a real sort of source of national pride for sort of the Baltic peoples and for, people throughout sort of, Russia and the former Soviet Union, where it's just sort of like, peasants drank it, Tsars drank it. It was just sort of this real sort of a beer of the people, so.
So maybe we should start on one of these beers. You sent us 3 Kvasses, so maybe we should start on one of these and talk about how you've kind of adapted the old into the new, and maybe you haven't. So which one should we start?
Sure. Why don't we start with the sour Kvass? This one was based on. Actually, why don't we go pour one, and then we'll tell you about it.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll see if it blows up over the sink here in the studio.
Yeah.
No, we're safe. We can take off the goggles now.
So there's a bit of story to this beer. So I don't know how much you want to talk about. This is the Kvass that we brewed, or it's based on the Kvass that we brewed with Scott Smith at East End Brewing in Pittsburgh. So we traveled out there. Do you want to talk about that some?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Scott is really the one who deserves credit, in my mind, for bringing Kvass and beer together more than they had been before. He's been brewing beers on this sort of variant for, I think, the last 4 years now or so, with Tom Baker, who used to be Heavyweight Brewing and is now Earth Bread and Brewery just outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. And so this beer, we went up there, summertime, maybe 6 months ago, and we had been working on this project. We were brewing with pros in a sense. I think this was this the last one?
Yeah.
This was the last Brew Local brew, and we hung out with him for the day and brewed. And do you want to give sort of a highlight reel of that day?
Yeah, sure. So what we did was he drove out on a Friday night, and what happens is Scott works with a local baker, and who stores away loaves and loaves of stale rye bread. That he can't sell at market. He mostly sells it in restaurants and at
supermarkets
and farmers markets and things like that. So this local baker, Bill, he always holds back all this, all these loaves of the stale rye bread, and then when Scott's going to brew, he gives him a call and he says, "I'm going to come over there and grab all this bread from you." So we went and got all this 60 loaves of bread that were then thawed, and then we just sliced that up. And we had like a large stainless steel hop back, probably maybe like a 3 or 5 barrel, something like that.
Yeah, so a big jacketed vessel that would keep heat in overnight.
Yeah. So then we sliced up 60 loaves of this rye bread and introduced 190-degree water to it, and just sort of made this big bread porridge overnight. And it was something like 1 gallon. How many per loaf was it?
Maybe 1 gallon of hot water per loaf of bread. Sort of just big chunks of bread, and we just left it sitting overnight. He put a blanket over it, just like a home brewer might in their mash tun. And we came in the next morning and brewed sort of a normal batch in terms of there was a mash of pale malt, or was it pills? Pills or pale?
Yeah, I think it was pills.
Some rye malt, some brown malt, but for a low gravity, just enough to get you maybe 1030 wort. And then we mushed this bread up and used a pump to suck almost all the bread and almost all the water into the kettle with the
we ran the pumps about as hard as he's ever run them, apparently. Because what was happening is, we pumped over the supplemental grain mash, and then we introduced this sort of bread goo at the same time into the kettle. We were having to force this like goopy bread liquid through the bottom sieve of the hop back. And it was a blast. It was a lot of fun, but the most turbid sort of just hazy mess of a kettle liquid you've ever seen.
This is actually incredibly clear. His beer it's almost opaque despite being yellow.
So then it's a 30-minute boil. It's hopped to just about 1 IBU.
So it was 7 ounces of hops in 350 gallons or something.
3% alpha steering Goldings. Yeah, so then we knocked out,
And about half a pound of caraway seeds in there, too.
Yep. No, I think a full pound.
Was it a full pound? Okay, full pound of caraway
It's all in the article and the BYO, so if anybody has any technical questions, you can always, pick up a copy of that, and it has all the recipes in there. So then we, it was about a 10, 11 barrel batch. Yeah. Scott had procured two large oak barrels. I think one, they were both brewed in at some point, but they had long used. They didn't have much character left in them. One was a huge hogshead that was probably over 70 gallons. The other one was probably around 55 gallons.
60, yeah.
So we put those up in the up in the attic of the brewery, which was probably in the 90s, 95. It's not yet. And then we again ran his pumps to capacity to pump this cold wort up, 30 feet in the air up into these barrels up on the second floor, where they went through primary fermentation. With just
for the whole 11 barrels, what was it? 2 tablespoons of Fleischmann's or Red Star bread yeast.
Yeah. And then the remainder of that, there's I guess about maybe 6 or 7 barrels left over that went into stainless steel. And then he had that kegged up within the whole thing ferments out in about a day or so.
And Scott, this isn't sort of a departure for him. He's always doing weird, low gravity, interesting beers. It was almost like brewing with a home brewer. I really had that sort of feel of, hey, this isn't something you do every day at a brewery. It was as weird for him as it was for us, I think.
It's almost like you tried to break as many rules as possible.
Absolutely.
You always hear, don't get starch into your wort. You don't want to steep, grains that don't have, that haven't been converted. Well, this was dumping, starch from loaves of bread directly into the kettle, without really caring about it.
And so then, Scott is still aging out those 2 barrels now. He said he's going to go probably start tasting it 6 months out, and then go 6 to 12 months to get it where he wants, and then he's going to bottle those. He's going to call that beer debaser. So we sort of took that model. Yeah. So the beer that we're having now is sort of just a scaled down version of same grain bill, everything else. So a relatively similar beer to the fresh.
And the sourness is completely, it showed up after maybe 3 or 4 weeks. We didn't add anything but the bread yeast. And part of it, bread yeast isn't dried on the same hygienic conditions that beer yeast. And even I remember did a yeast experiment and found without hops, even the dried ale yeast give you a little bit of tartness or something. Yeah. Yeah. And with IBU, it's not enough to hold back lacto or whatever else might be in there.
So why don't you guys tell us what's your impression of this Kvass?
Well, I'm pretty impressed. I like it a lot. It's got a really sharp sourness. I'm kind of surprised that you actually didn't dose it with lacto because of how sour it is, and with the gravity of the original wort being so low. It's like, what's it eaten to produce all this sourness? Because if it's
the
still
starch is the bread,
right.
So
it's very much a Berliner Weiss kind of. If someone put this in front of me and made me declare it something, I think the first thing I would say is Berliner
or caraway Berliner.
Yeah, it actually has that caraway flavor too.
So you don't think that keeping the bread overnight. You can do a sour mash by doing something similar with malted barley. You don't think that
water was so hot though? The water is at 190 degrees.
Yeah, and the wort wasn't sour when we drank it. That could be some of the sweetness or something, but it definitely seems to have developed the sourness. Yeah. After
are you all getting into caraway? Is that something you
I did at first. At first, my first impression was, wow, the rye bread is really coming through. And I think after you mentioned the caraway, I think that's what I'm calling rye. It's not really rye; it's caraway.
There is rye malt in there, but caraway is synonymous with that flavor of rye.
Yeah, I think I get most of the rye on the nose, basically.
Yeah, there is kind of it's a light colored beer. It's kind of a, what did you call, straw colored, fairly cloudy, but it's low gravity, but it's refreshing, but substantial. I mean, it's not like drinking a watery beer.
Right. Ours is not highly carbonated either. I don't know how carbonated yours is. But ours is not super carbonate.
Yeah, ours, it's sort of a little bit Sprite. There's definitely some carbonation, some CO2 popping up. But yeah, like you were saying, this is Kvass is a summer drink. And if you go to the Ukraine, you'll see these tankards, and people just go up with the glass, and you pay 50 cents or something like that, and they just
rubles.
Oh yeah, whatever. And this is a big tanker truck, and they just open up the spout, and then that's just this. It means summer to a lot of people. I think it's representative, and so it's supposed to be this very thirst quenching kind of
I was actually reading a Michael Jackson article where he found some of this in Russia, and the guy that was telling him about it said they'll actually warm it in the winter and drink it hot.
Huh.
Oh yeah, I heard that. That's a
We have a microwave.
We should probably mention that you can get Kvass in a lot of Russian specialty stores, but a lot of it is this sort of really sweet, soda poppy, raisiny, dark,
non-alcoholic, not fermented.
or 0.25% alcohol. Or where there's one good version. We were up in New York a couple of weeks ago from All Star Bakery that Nathan flipped out when he saw.
Yeah, it's we went specifically to Brighton Beach, which is just next door to Coney Island. It's a little Odessa neighborhood. And it's just you pop in these stores and you find the coolest stuff. And we found probably 7-8 different versions of Kvass. But there's this one called All Stars that's made up in from a bakery up in Canada that is really the real deal. And actually, the way you sort of find it will have a couple of raisins floating in the top. Is it?
So they add that for carbonation or something.
And it's
a nice yeast cake at the bottom.
I held back. It comes from 2-liter soda bottles, and I held back a bottle for the last couple of weeks, and it's swollen to just about bursting. So you really know it's fermented. So not like these other pasteurized soda poppy versions. Yeah. So I suggest taking that train out there to Brighton Beach if you're ever in New York.
Yeah. But other than that, really, East End is a lot more authentic, I think, than some of the Russian versions that have really been sort of sanitized for modern drinking. East End's probably a lot more like what you have gotten at somebody's grandmother's house or 50 years ago or something like that.
Huh.
So how much is sourness? Is sourness typical, or is it not?
Well, you got to understand that, again, with bread yeast, it's not, like Mike was referring to earlier, it's not produced under sanitary conditions. And with one IBU, I think we just had a couple of grams of hops in this 5-gallon batch. There's a good chance that the beer is going to take on a lactic character, which I find very complimentary. Makes it more refreshing.
But for an actual Kvass, it's something that fresh, if you were drinking it a day or two out, it wouldn't have. But some people like to hold on to it for a week or something and get some of that tartness and some of that balance.
So is this typically a beer that's better enjoyed fresh?
Well, it would be your personal choice.
Yeah, and in that same Michael Jackson article, he talks about how the great devotees of the style let it sit and get sour. And that's how the connoisseurs enjoy their Kvass.
To me, it's
to taste, really.
Yeah, to me, it's the sort of thing I really like. Salted cabbage, sort of like sauerkraut in a day or two old, where it gets sort of broken down, and then some people like sauerkraut that's older and gets lactic and gets a little mushy and really. And so it's a personal preference thing. You might like it really fresh and bready and sweeter, and you might like it a little older and drier and.
How old's the one we're drinking now?
This is, we brewed this maybe 5 months ago.
And then we brewed it in summer.
Yeah. 4 or 5 months, something like that. It's been in the bottle 3 or 4 months just in my basement at basement temps.
That's very nice.
It's actually quite delicious.
Well, let's move on to the next one.
Why don't we do the winter one, the smoked spruce?
Okay.
Explosion or anything?
No, in fact, it's low carbonation, kind of like the first one.
I spent about 20 minutes off gassing and recapping the night before I boxed that up for you.
So what do you get in the nose right off the bat?
A little smoke for sure, like a smoked pork butt.
Yeah. So the idea, I guess there's a couple of ideas.
This was Nathan's sort of brainchild.
Yeah. So this is a sort of we had both had a beer, a few, over the summer. It was the Scandinavian beer. It's a collaboration between two really amazing European brewers. Jens, who brews at Han Brewery in Norway, and they've done some crazy sour beers, some really interesting beers there.
They have a non-profit or something like that. It's something weird.
And it's all their beers have this very Nordic, historic kind of. They've done some amazing stuff, and then they did a collaborative beer with Menno Oliver at De Molen in the Netherlands, and it was this weird historic smoked gruit that was just insane. It was so good. So that sort of fed into this idea of, well, why don't we take the Kvass, this historic, the summer drink, move it into the northern climes and say, what would you like in a winter Kvass? What's evocative of that sort of cold Scandinavian sort of Nordic winter? So you got it's got smoked malt in it, I think about 30% of the
like 3 pounds
grain bill, something like that.
Maybe more.
Grist. And then it's got these dried elderberries.
Dried elderberries.
And then
you can just get it like a local food co-op or a health food store or something like that.
And then spruce. So it's got blue spruce in it that was just clipped. I got a blue spruce
and
Christmas tree from a couple years ago.
In the aroma, I'm not sure, because it's really smoky, how much of that is the smoke, and then I'm not sure if there's a resiny, piney that's sort of in there playing with it. It gives it more of a sharpness that I don't get often from the Weyermann smoked malt.
Yeah, I'm getting mostly kind of a bacony smokiness in the nose.
This is another lactic beer, so it's got a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
Although not quite as much sourness, and this is a little bit bigger. I think this was 1040 to start instead of 1030.
A
little bit more body,
brooding.
a little bit more sweetness, but still a very light, alcohol beer as far as normal beer goes.
This is some pretty weird stuff. So I'm interested in what you guys are.
No, I like it. I mean, one thing about smoked beers, or at least the ones that I've had, the smokiness tends to kind of lie on my tongue. But this is interesting because it's also a tart beer, because the smokiness is kind of this, dark flavor in the beginning, and then the tart kind of cleansing effect comes in at the end. So you wind up with something that is enjoyably smoky but yet clean. If a sour beer can be clean, but you know what I mean.
No, but both this and the previous one were sour, but they didn't have much of that Brettanomyces, that funky, earthy, barnyard. It's a very sort of lactic. Like Andy was saying, it almost tastes like we just add some lactic acid to it.
It's just tart.
Yeah, it's almost like a Sour Patch Kid. If you suck on those.
Well, I would never accuse you of adding lactic acid to a beer, Michael. I know all your lactic comes from bugs, from real bugs.
But yeah, I mean, you got to think how rough and ready these beers are. I mean, these fermented with bread yeast, with just a couple,
a gram or less than a gram
or something. This is about as rough and ready as a beer can get. So to actually have something that's drinkable and enjoyable, I love both these beers. I think it was a real accomplishment. I think so. I was happy that they actually, came
on our
out
first
as
try.
well as they did,
So describe the brewing process on this one. I mean, did you do the same thing of soaking the bread overnight and all that, or?
Yeah, no, we did the exact same thing, except on this one I baked some pumpernickel bread instead of sort of the standard rye bread that we used for the first one. And I cheated a little bit. Being a brewer, I thought, how do I make something dark without making it too burnt or roasty tasting? I ground up some Kvass Special 2 in my coffee grinder and added it to the bread dough with some molasses for a little more color and flavor. And then, we chopped it up, soaked it in hot water. And what we did that I think was a little bit easier than what East End did, we took a stick blender and just after the bread is soaked overnight, we were getting ready to brew, and pureed the stuff and then just dumped it straight into the boil kettle during the boil. And a note, if you want to try that, make sure you stir. The starch will settle on the bottom and can burn if you're not
easy to scorch your kettle on these beers.
So when did you add the spruce and the elderberries, and talk a bit about the boil?
Yeah. I think these were both 30-minute boil beers. Can you help jog my memory on the spruce?
Spruce was right at the beginning.
Yeah. Was the bittering addition?
This was a completely unhopped beer.
Yeah, 0 hops.
And then elderberries were right at the end.
Yes, so the spruce we wanted to get some balance to the beer, so we sort of were going to get that earthy bitterness or resiny bitterness from the spruce instead of the hops. And then we sort of just bruised the elderberries and a mortar and pestle, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that's what we did. Yeah, and we put
I
those
didn't do a very good job
right
with
at the end, with just maybe 5 minutes out or something like that.
That created a great point of discussion during my Thanksgiving dinner with my 98-year-old grandfather. He'd gone into this story. Despite being 98, he still has these stories that no one has ever heard. And he was telling us that during Prohibition, his father had found some wild elderberries down by the river, harvested them, made wine from them, and aged in a whiskey barrel. And the people had been, like his coworkers had been coming over and getting drunk, and his wife threw it out. And I just thought, well, that's where it comes from. And I got the article, and I said, elderberries, this is what you're talking about? He goes, yep, that's them right there.
There is this history in Appalachia of doing these elder wines. It might even go back to older Europe. I'm not really sure, but the people have been making wine out of both the berries and the flowers.
If you've never had elderberries, they're sort of like a tart raisin or something. They have a that dried dark fruit character, but then they're also a little more sour than a raisin or a date or a fig or something like that.
Huh. And this is a drastically different color than the first one we drink. What's responsible for that?
There was smoke. The smoke mold.
The smoke mold, right? Is usually is probably it could account for that.
And otherwise, did you add crystal rye or something?
Yeah, we have to look at the at the sheets on this one, because this one, like we said, we just went a little hardier than we did with the with that earlier Kvass. We wanted just a little more body, a little more colored. So Mike's just gonna.
Yeah, so this one, here. Just like the previous one, I had some brown malt, some rye malt, some beechwood. We went with Maris Otter instead of Pilsner like we did on the first one.
But then crystal rye.
And then half a pound of crystal rye, which is probably where most of that color is coming from. Huh. Also a little bit more of that
bread. The bread was also dark, right?
Yeah. Absolutely, the bread was quite a bit dark because it was pumpernickel.
Yeah.
So we should... I want to talk about this as kind of a practical hint to homebrewers out there. I'm asked all the time, how do you send beer and how do you pack beer for sending and all that? And unfortunately, you sent us some other beers, two of which were bottles of the same batch of a Berliner Weiss, and luckily. I say luckily because we had one broken and it was just happened to be one of the duplicate bottles.
Yeah.
So you packed this box like I pack. You had bubble wrap around each individual bottle. You put all the bottles in a garbage bag and you surrounded it with shredded newspaper. And it's the same way I've gotten them, and the same way that I've sent them. And this is the first time that I've ever had experienced a broken bottle. So the only thing that I can think of that would improve the packing method is to maybe tape all of the bottles once they're wrapped in bubble wrap. Tape all of them together so that they don't have a chance.
So one can't hit the other.
Exactly.
Just go overboard.
Yeah,
and that's part of it. And I sent another box out the same day, and all the beers made it on that one, luckily. But sometimes you just get unlucky, and somebody drops your package 10 feet.
Well, I think they kicked your package because it was all caved in on the side. So
and that's where the garbage bag comes in. That even though one broke, you still got it. Otherwise, right. if they start getting leaks, normally they'll return it or they'll trash it or they'll. And even if you break one, better that the other 7 bottles get there.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to stick that in there because, people ask me all the time, how do you ship beers?
And the other tip I'll give you, I was just reading some article, I think Popular Science or Popular Mechanic just shipped a bunch of accelerometers and stuff to see which carrier was the most reliable at not stuff. And sadly for homebrewers and beer nerds, U.S. Postal Service won. And that never want to ship with because that's actually like an issue to send stuff with them.
It's against the law.
It's playing with fire, I think. Yeah.
Whereas FedEx or UPS, it might be against their policy, but they don't really seem to care. And even I've had 1 or 2 boxes in my time that did leak through or something happened, and they'll just give you a call and say, hey, or they'll pop up on your old screen, hey, your package was damaged. Too bad.
Yeah, I think it was Rick Sellers who was actually got into a bit of hot water with one of the carriers, and I can't remember the story, but just safe to say, better safe than sorry.
Exactly.
But enough practical advice on the shipping side of things. Shall we? Any more to say about the winter beer?
No, and this was one of those beers that we were aiming at 18 points at once, and maybe I would bank down on the smoke a little bit. I mean, I like the smokiness, but I would have liked maybe the spruce and the elderberries to come through a little bit more. And still be smoky, but not quite as smoky.
Yeah, maybe it's tongue fatigue, but I'm not getting it as much as I had been.
The smoke?
Yeah.
I think it's a nice balance. A lot of times smoke beers come off either like an ashtray or too subtle. You can just barely, this is a smoke beer, but you can barely tell it's smoked. This is nice. It's clearly smoky, but it's not annoying, and it's a delicious smoke. It's not kind of that acrid, smoky character you sometimes get.
And when you think the point of reference on this beer would be a Viking beer from 1,200 years ago or something that, it's sort of that's what we were sort of aiming for. So hopefully we got somewhere near that target,
Well, the next time I see a Viking, I'll ask him.
Yeah. Put that in his corn and have him drink it, right?
I'll just send him your way.
So should we go into that you all have that third bottle of Kvass, is the clean Kvass with the beer yeast?
The pumpernickel?
The pumpernickel, you got it.
Pumpernickel porter, it says.
Yep.
Yeah, let's give that a shot.
And that's the Kvass as well.
Yeah, so we wanted to do, something.
People who didn't like sour smoke.
Yeah, something a little more baseline. So this was, it is a Kvass in that we used the pumpernickel bread again, a loaf of pumpernickel bread, but it really is the base of this beer. The grist would have made it more like a brown porter, and it's fermented with an American ale yeast.
Yeah. And we had, I think, 10 or 12 IBUs of hops on this one, so enough to keep any lacto that was on the ale yeast at bay.
Did you give them the caraway version?
I gave you the caraway version. So we have a clean version that did not have any caraway or add molasses. And then this version to sort of be a little more pumpernickel bready. The other one just came off. I like it, but it's very much just like a clean, dark mild or something like that. With the American ale yeast, it's a little plain. This one I primed with molasses that I heated up with some crushed caraway seed.
Huh.
And I think I may have done a little bit too much on the caraway. I mean, it's a really sort of bold, rye caraway sort of flavor.
It smells a lot like a porter.
Yeah. Has a nice little chocolatey nose to it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another one that's only, maybe 4.2% alcohol or so.
A pretty traditional brown porter, It's got Marisade or brown.
That's really nice. I like that.
Yeah, it's
most
very
accessible
well
of the three, definitely.
It's very well balanced. It's not. It's a complete departure from the other two.
Right.
But
nice and clean.
Yeah, roasty.
Mm-hmm. Good long roast aftertaste.
It's got that nice sort of chocolatey coffee roast, but not any sort of bitter or harsh. Mm-hmm. And we use some chocolate rye in this for the color. And since it's dehusked just like Carafa Special or something like that, it's a lot smoother.
Yeah, very rounded sort of. And just to prove that we don't just do sour beers exclusively. Is that why
This one definitely has a better carbonation level than the first two.
Yeah. And this is much, this is a very satisfying session beer.
Mm-hmm.
I've made and had, session beers that are, 3% or around there, and they can be, sort of timid and weak and boring. Yeah. But this isn't that at all.
No, there's no reason you can't make a 3.5% or 4% alcohol beer that has just as much flavor as a big beer. In a lot of ways, it's easier to make a more flavorful beer because you don't have all that alcohol and all that malt getting in the way. This, you can really taste the specialty grains. You can really taste the caraway. I think the bread really helps too to give it a little bit more body than a beer this size normally would have. Some of that starchy fullness.
And this is just fermented with ale yeast.
Just SO5.
And
my go-to.
And you said it was hopped, right?
Yes, this was hopped with. I can pull up the recipe. Fuggles, like an ounce in a 5 gallons.
So again, super traditional sort of brown porter,
Mm-hmm.
But with a loaf of bread,
right.
Dumped in.
But if you hadn't told someone, and if this wasn't a caraway version, just a sort of a well done, I think.
I don't really taste the caraway. Is that in their version or ours or both? Or
I think it's in both of them
because I'm not really getting that. Not aggressive.
Roast and chocolate are definitely to the front on this beer. Yeah,
it's a little crusty.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe it's my imagination, but I think I'm tasting a little bit of a kind of a toasty bread crust flavor in there.
Right.
The brown malt really gives some of that toasty, a little darker than toasty kind of flavor that all three of these beers had. But I think this one sort of shows it the most.
It's just very nice.
This is going back into that idea that the reason why Scott at East End brewed this beer is he's got this session ale project that I think he's into like this 48th or almost 50th brew. He's been around since
5 years.
Yeah. And what he does is he's constantly putting out a new beer under the session ale project, and it's a beer under 4.5% alcohol.
Most of the time.
Is what he aims for. Sometimes well below that. So he does Goes, he does Berliner Weiss, he does Milds, he does Grisette. This whole idea that he's really trying to have a beer that you can drink all night and maintain your dignity, So I think he should really be applauded for that, because so many brewers are just getting out there with these super aggressive, like
18% double imperial stout.
And so I really do think that he's onto something there. So everyone should support that guy.
If you happen to live in Pittsburgh,
you
can't get his beer anywhere.
And that's another thing. He's a very green brewer. He's very concerned about the environment, and so he reuses these swing top bottles. You bring him back, and it's just a really great operation.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, Jeff Bearer of Craft Beer Radio. They're from Pittsburgh, and they talk very highly of Scott. So that'd be a fun brewery to visit. And is he still pretty much a one-man band over there?
He took on.
We actually were up there helping out. He was really excited to have us. His assistant Brendan had run off to the World Cup.
Yeah. Only in the last year has he taken on an assistant there, and it's a great place to visit because it's he lives. The brewery is in what appears to be an abandoned, boarded up building on the east side of Pittsburgh in the Homewood neighborhood, which is just a sort of pretty depressed area. So it's really great. Really goes into his vision of recycling and reusing.
And makes the rent really cheap too.
It makes the rent really cheap.
So if you we'll read your article and brew your own magazine, but what tips can you give home brewers if they're wanting to play with bread in their beer to make it successful?
I mean, I think the first sort of key step is pick the right bread. If you're not going to make your own, make sure to read the label and look for something that does not have any added oil. Oil is just going to screw with your head retention and screw with the mouthfeel, and is something you just don't want to deal with. Then just soak it, puree it, and dump it in and make sure you stir it.
If you're going to go the bread yeast route, really it only takes a pinch. It's probably going to ferment out within 24 hours.
That yeast is just bred to be super.
It just replicates itself. Yeah. Really, just
if you don't want it to be sour, add some hops.
Yeah, and drink it fresh.
Drink it fresh.
You can go a lot of different ways with this. Like we saw, you can go very clean, or you can go really and just open it up to the imagination and just go anywhere with it. So.
Very nice.
Fun. Yes, very nice.
Have we convinced you guys?
Yeah, well,
I'm gonna brew one.
Yeah, I'll put anything in the kettle. What do you think, Alex?
It's delicious. Yeah, good job.
I actually see areas where Michael and I have talked privately about Berliner Weiss several times, and I can see where I might throw a loaf of bread into my next Berliner Weiss just to help make it sour enough. That's usually the biggest problem I have with them, is getting them tart enough at the really low gravities they start with. And this would do it, and you would have to know that I threw a loaf of bread into the brew pot.
Yeah, particularly if it was a relatively plain, just a wheat loaf of, bread.
Yeah, or maybe no need sourdough bread. Maybe follow the recipe on Michael's blog.
One point of the article was to usurp, actually, Berliner Weiss as the darling of historic sour beers, low-alcohol sour beers. So, we're doing our part here. So we expect everybody listening to join in, comrades.
And it's actually, this is not without sort of historical precedent. Berliner Weiss, apparently in Berlin, one of the local things, instead of the red or the green shush, they use the Kummel, the caraway liqueur, as their little chaser in there. And so the caraway and the sourness actually has sort of a German connection.
Huh. Well, guys, this has been fun, and thank goodness we got together again. It's been a while, and I look forward to the next time, maybe sometime really soon.
That'd be great. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was terrific. Hopefully you can have us again on again sometime.
Yeah, guys, thanks for these great beers, man. Incredible.
Yeah, good job.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Well, thanks again to Mike and Nathan, and as we were hinting subtly there at the end, this is the first interview of a double header. The guys also sent us a couple of samples of barrel-aged beers that they've been playing with, so stay tuned for that one as well. And I'll link to both Mike's and Nathan's blogs in the description of this episode on basicbrewingradio.com. And don't forget to check out their article in Brew Your Own magazine. And by the way, if you click on the BYO ad on our site, you can get a free issue of the magazine. And if you decide to subscribe after reading that, you'll be helping to support this show. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, write to james@basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Our new DVD is here, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing. And our 2011 Brewers Logbooks are in stock as well. Check out our online store to see those, and you can also check out our other DVDs, Stepping into All-Grain, Low-Tech Lagering, and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits as well. We got combo deals to save you a few bucks, and you can check out our shirts as well in the store too. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVDs on basicbrewing.com, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order them directly from us at basicbrewingshop.com. Thanks to everybody who's continued to click on our Amazon.com associate link. We appreciate the support. Our featured products this week that were purchased through the link are Aqua Terra Bath Collection 6-piece set, Juicy Pomegranate, and Terry Cloth Doggy Bathrobe, medium. Are the two connected? No way of me knowing. I can't tell who bought what. No worries there. Just click on the Amazon.com logo on our site. The next time you feel like Amazon shopping, and we appreciate your support. The doggy bathrobe has me choked up a bit. And don't forget that if you can join the American Homebrewers Association through our associate link as well. That's all until next time, thankfully. Until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by our buddy Kelly Dodson down in Austin, Texas. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.